Thank you so much, Chris. We need to chat sometime.
Yay. Well, you know what? We did go live, and I was thinking what you said was really appropriate. So Chris, will you just tell Karen that one more time so that the audience that's listening now or listening in replay gets a chance to know that you've just newly discovered a gem that Karen provides. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm so delighted to do that. So Karen, I just want to tell you that I've just finished reading your book, 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying, and thought it was terrific, and I recommend it to everybody listening. And I commend you for writing such a great book.
Thank you so much. That means everything to me. I appreciate that.
And I second that. And we should also probably notice that Chris has a brand new book out on the topic we'll be discussing today.
Oh, and the title?
Oh, the title is Achieving, here it is, I'll hold it up, Achieving a Good Death, subtitle, A Practical Guide to the End of Life. So that's the book that Gary is referring to. Just came out from Bloomsbury late last year.
Wow. And I'm already attracted to it because I love the autumn colors and the leaves falling, etc. And it's just like it becomes more brilliant as you look to the right. And Karen, what you said reminds me, I got to go to a gerontological conference, so Gero conference, just a few years ago, and they had brought in a speaker from your general area, the East Coast, and he writes regularly for the Wall Street Journal. And can I come up with his name right now? No. But what he said was, we're journalists. We are looking for controversies. We're looking for problems that are ongoing that will really engage our readers. And he said, I decided, who better to talk to than aging people who are in downtown New York City, New York, that are living on the 3rd floor. They have to walk up with their cane or their walker and their little bag of groceries because that's all they can handle. And who better to talk to about, that life is inadequate, it's unfair. The government ought to do something. Nobody cares. And he said, I just had trouble finding aging. He said, for me, I thought if they're in their late 80s, they must now know for sure that they are in that aging category. And he said, I had so much trouble finding someone who would just sit there and complain and rail against. I was hearing things like, any morning that I wake up, it's another good day. And yes, the only exercise I get is going down those stairs over to the closest store, getting the few things I know I can get up the stairs with and back up. So I'm grateful for that exercise. I rented this place 41 years ago and I still like it, still love the view, and I'm just not willing to move. And I know I'll have to pay a lot more if I start brand new somewhere else. They're still giving me a deal, whatever it was. And so he finally just thought, well, these aren't going to make Wall Street Journal articles, not the kind that they're looking for. They want hard-hitting news. So he compiled a book, and it really was, what it's like to age from those who are doing it. And, and just what is your mindset, et cetera. And that reminds me of your title, Lessons on Living from Those Who Are Dying.
So Christine, let me interrupt you a second. I also want to I also want the audience to know that Gary is the creator and founder of something called the Good Death Society blog, which you can get at let me look. You can find it at thegooddeathsocietyblog.net. I've got that right, Gary?
That's right.
Yeah, and it's really worthwhile. Karen, you may have written for it. I don't know, but I've written a couple of times, and it's really excellent. So I recommend it to your audience. And Christine, time's running out, so let's move on to the first question. Shall we? Go ahead.
Oh my goodness, we only have an hour. It's never long enough. All righty. First question. Well, the first one I'm going to ask is your personal motivation. I like to call it your path to this point. Sometimes you hear that someone said, the one thing I was never going to do is what I've become an expert in. And of course, you hear the opposite. I was almost born into this. It became a part of my life so early, and I've just never lost the taste for it and the
Very good.
zeal.
Yeah.
How did you get into end of life and the end of life movement? I'm interested in that.
Karen, you go first, please.
All right, I will. Well, I entered the end of life arena via grief. I was a young family medicine doctor, and my father died by suicide. Was really devastated with grief over his death, and not having been trained about grief in my medical training at all. Knew nothing about death and dying. And I got the inspiration to start volunteering for hospice because I knew I have to understand what death is and have a framework for that if I'm ever going to manage this grief. I started as a volunteer and I fell in love with it. And I felt like this is actually the kind of medicine I was always meant to practice. And I ended up shifting my career at that point from family medicine to hospice, where I learned so much. I didn't come in knowing anything, but I came out of it knowing enough to go ahead and write the book that I wrote.
Gary, your turn.
Well, I came in through, I would call that the compassion door. I came in through the human rights door. I spent about 20 years living outside of the United States in places where dying was just considered a normal part of living, as it was here, decades ago. And when I came back to my own country, I had what they called re-entry shock when I discovered that while I was gone, we turned dying in this country into a huge money-making conveyor belt that actually resulted in more suffering to the people doing the dying than otherwise would be the case. And that kind of, got me angry and got my civil rights juices flowing. And I thought, let's do something about it to correct that here in the United States. So I joined Final Exit Network back in, Hemlock Society, the organization that we have descended from, in the early 80s. And I've been an activist ever since.
And Gary is, like I am, we're both on the board of Final Exit Network. It's a terrific organization, and not enough people know about it. So, Gary, did you finish, Gary?
Yes, sure. That's
okay.
enough.
So my answer is that I'm now 77. In my 60s, I suddenly realized that death is going to happen to me. I mean, up to that point, I thought other people did death, and that had nothing to do with me. And then so I started, and I realized I was incredibly scared, just incredibly frightened of this notion. And so I decided to confront it and learn about it and study it. And so that's how I got into it. And that whole process was catalyzed by watching the awful deaths of my parents and my three brothers who died of prostate cancer and health and heart diseases. They died in great pain and with a lot of suffering, and the very opposite of a good death. So that's how Christine, I got into it. Back to you.
Wow. This sounds counterintuitive how would you encourage a person to focus on their mortality and to engage in a discussion about it?
Yeah, Karen, you go first.
Well, the point that I'm always trying to make is that if we can overcome our fear just enough to begin making space for death to be part of life, which it is, which is totally natural, we pretty soon discover, like I did my first day in hospice, oh my goodness, this isn't as frightening as I thought. And it's actually really enriching when you're not running away from death and shutting it out of your awareness, but just allowing it to be there. And I usually encourage people to start paying attention to nature, because death is everywhere around us in nature. Go for a walk in the woods and you'll see the dead leaves in a dead tree and maybe a dead animal, and you'll realize, oh, this is a cycle, and it's just natural and part of life.
Yeah. Gary, go ahead.
Well, a few years ago, I was working with an organization that provided cultural training to people coming to the United States. And the topic came up that we're talking about. And it turned out that they thought that Americans really didn't die. They faded away, they bit the dust. We have all these words and euphemisms about death to help us, soften the blow. And I found with my own family, my grandkids, are all tuned in to my desires and wishes at the end of my life. And it's not a taboo topic with us at all. So I think you start early, and you often talk about these things over dinner and so on, so it becomes normalized. It's not a big deal. There's no taboo necessary. I learned that there is no taboo in those places I live, so we try to replicate that in our own family.
Well, those are two wonderful answers from Karen and Gary. I don't have much to add. I encourage people to talk about it, and I find people at first say, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it," but I find that, and I don't know if Gary and Karen have the same experience, but I find that when actually people do get into the conversation, they actually begin to be curious, and they want to know, well, what is green burial? What's an ethical will? What is an advanced? When they begin to get a bit of knowledge, then they actually enjoy learning about it when they realize there is so much to learn. It's a complex, big topic, and so. But I would do a very good question, Christine. I think there's no way around it. We just have to be brave and encourage people to talk about the fact that we have finitude.
How helpful that you have a visitor right now. It is Lisa Fevick. She lives in Trinidad and Tobago. And so it's already been discussed that culturally, America has shifted, and other cultures, it's part of song, it's part of art, it's part of dinner time conversation. It's just a flow. And here we tend to stick as many quirks in it as we can and put it in the category of avoid, or may I say, a void. That was an empty subject. He never talked about what he preferred or how things should go, his core values. So now we're just guessing and worrying constantly. Are we honoring? Is this what he would have wanted? Sorry that I picked on men. Sometimes women are more open.
Christine, did Lisa have a question?
If she does, I would invite her to put that question into our chat. That would be lovely.
Yeah, let's go on to the next. Let's go on to the next question.
Well, you may continue in the same order that you've been doing with ladies first, but I wonder if you're going to reverse it now when I ask you to please define a good death.
Okay, well, I'll go first. A good death is the death that the person wants. It's very personal, extremely subjective, and one person may want all the medical interventions they can get at the end of life, and somebody else may say, no, put me in, let me go get hospice and have comfort care. So there's no sort of single answer, and everyone has their own answer. But in general, people want to have a gentle, pain-free death without suffering. They want to be surrounded by their loved ones. They ideally would like to be at home. They want to have their advance directives followed. They want to have the dementia rider to their advance directive followed. They want to have the doctors be straightforward with them and tell them, look, I think you only have 3 weeks left, so that they can have time to have those critical conversations, to say thank you, to say goodbye, to say I love you, I forgive you, please forgive me. Those Ira Byock famous conversations, and so a good death in some ways is pretty obvious, is pretty, I think, straightforward for most people. They want to be surrounded by love. They want to have lots of thank yous and discussions about what a great life it was, and those shared memories and humorous stories and so on. So that would be my quick answer.
And who would like to address that next?
Gary, you go.
Yeah, Gary.
Well, there is some scientific evidence on this. A couple of years ago, 35 studies were put together in a mega study on the topic, what is a good death? They were trying to define standards of treatment for doctors. And doctors deal with this issue all the time, and they're trying to find a standard treatment. And after all this study, the researcher ended up saying, ask the patient.
Yeah, right.
So it all boils down to that. They looked at all these different factors, and they applied to some people, not to others. Just ask the patient. And the other little evidence comes from Oregon, where they have a medical aid in dying law now for 22 years, I believe. And part of that legislation requires them to do a survey every year of the people who use that law. And a survey is a list of questions, basically, what is it bothers you about dying? And number one on the list almost every year is the loss of personal autonomy. It's not fear of death. It's not pain. It's not the huge expenses involved. It comes down to when you get close to the end, other people start making decisions. And so I think that's important to keep in mind. Your choice, your death, your life, your death, your choice.
Very good.
That shouldn't surprise me, but I'm really glad that you brought that up.
And yeah, I was going to say, on a personal level, to me, it seems peaceful death is a good death. Whatever it takes to bring about peace for each person, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But I have met people who want to wrestle with death, who feel like, if I just give up and let go and go easily into my death, I haven't done my life justice. And they're like the poem, do not go gentle into that good night. They want to fight, and they want to be angry, and they want to really challenge death. And that's what to them feels like then they have completed their life and finished it fully. And I was surprised when I found that from certain people and heard that from them, because that's not my mindset, but that's all to the point of whatever the person wants. How do they view it, and what makes their life feel fulfilled and complete?
Wow. I mean, it really sounds like, I'll just say me grieving, going through stages of grief, having to do with my own finality, or being told the finality is much closer than you would have guessed now with this diagnosis or what have you. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for addressing that. I want the audience to really think about how they would answer this question too. How can people best prepare for the end of life? And I don't know whether you're answering from the person who knows they're about to, or from the people who are like, I don't know if I'm ready for this moment, or we knew that this moment would come. What can I do now? And what are the options for making these preparations?
Karen, why don't you go first?
Yeah, well, if we prepare in advance and we think about our death and dying, we have an option to choose just natural dying, that we would like to die of whatever it is that is causing us to be ill and to age, and to allow it to take its natural course. We could also choose that we want full-on invasive, aggressive medical care at the end of our life. That's a choice that's available. We can choose medical aid in dying if we would like to have that. Those are choices. It's not available everywhere, I will say, but those are choices that are available to us. They're only available, though, if we think about it in advance. Because for people who have not prepared and have no paperwork, they will most likely end up in an emergency room somewhere receiving full-on aggressive medical care, because that is the default here in the US, at least in the medical system. They won't have a choice.
Yeah. Gary, go ahead.
Well, I think there are two things. The Boy Scout be prepared motto really applies here. Number one, I think you need to identify exactly what you don't want and what you do want at the end of your life. And that's easily done with something called an advance directive. Every state has a form that's easily accessible. And it's a series of questions so you can identify what you want. And that becomes an official document that can be referred to when you're at the end of your life. And the other thing, number two, is to pick a medical representative. Sometimes they're called surrogates, who will be able to speak for you when you can't. If you're unconscious, or you're having some inability to speak for yourself, that person needs to be assertive and know exactly what you want. In other words, who has read and understands and you've discussed your advance directive with. Those are the two most important steps, I believe.
Well, Gary and Karen have both given excellent answers to your question, Christine, about I think it was how to best prepare for a good death. And so I think only thing I can add to their excellent answers are that I would say one thing that helps having a good death is having a good life. One thing I've learned from hospice nurses is live well to die well. And the person who lives a giving life, a life of helping other people, a life of trust and authenticity, integrity, and having friends and blah blah blah, having a family, blah blah, whatever, But if you have live a good life, a decent life with good values, then you're more likely. Nothing's guaranteed. We're more likely to end up in a good way. And then I want to emphasize the answer that Gary gave, which is an advance directive, and of course adding to that, and a dementia rider. And then I think another thing is having conversations with your loved ones. This has already come up, but having conversation with your loved ones about what you want, so they know, so that when you die, they're not saying, oh my gosh, what did dad want? They have a sense of it, and then they can give you what you want. And I think another thing is, to underscore what Gary said, having a healthcare agent or someone to represent you when you can't speak for yourself, incredibly important. And then I think having another thing which I think helps you to have a good death is having an ethical will, writing an ethical will, often called a legacy letter, but writing an ethical will or a memoir, something that it's a sort of a love letter to your survivors, to your children or nephews, nieces, neighbors, whoever is going to survive you. Having where you express your love, what you love about them, what your values were, what you found meaningful in your life, so they can learn from. So you leave some sort of legacy for future people to cherish and treasure. And then the only thing I'd add after that is, I think trying to go. I mean, Karen is a hospice physician. She's an expert in this area, and I just think hospice, and I'm very active in hospice too, and I think hospice is a wonderful thing, and I commend Karen for her work in hospice. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing when people can face up to when they got less than 6 months to live, to face up to the fact that they're going to die, to give up curative care, to accept comfort care, and to live the best life they can in those last few days, weeks, or months. That's that. And we saw with Jimmy Carter, it can last a long time, So that's a long answer, but those are some of the things that need to be done to have a good life, to have a good death.
Hey, Karen, I'd like to ask you a personal question on that. I'm very close to a person who would like to go into hospice. How do you go about getting a designation?
You need to have a referral of a physician, and it can be your own private physician, or it could be the physician who works with the hospice that gives you the referral and accreditation. You have to be 6 months or determined that you're 6 months away from death. And so that's a little bit tricky sometimes depending on the diagnosis. And that's what the doctor is being asked to do, to sign a statement that you have 6 months or less to live. And here in the US, at least, that's what qualifies you to receive the hospice benefit and get hospice care. So you do need the help of a doctor or perhaps a nurse practitioner to refer you in so that you can receive hospice services.
So when you're hospitalized ahead of time, could a case manager, a social worker, a nurse that acts as case manager, is that something they could do, or does it need to be a medical doctor like you?
It does have to be a medical doctor who signs that form, but a lot of times caseworkers in the hospital will call in a hospice worker and make the referral for patients. And they'll bring the hospice team in to the hospital so that they can start that connection right there before the patient goes home.
I saw another study that doctors go into hospice sooner than their patients often do on average. And apparently you doctors know something about the value of doing this.
It's interesting that doctors, in surveys over and over, they say they would choose hospice for themselves right away rather than continuing curative care. And yet those very same doctors have a hard time recommending hospice to their patients because even for them, it's hard to talk about. So they end up not saying it and not talking about it. And that just underscores it's hard for everyone. It's hard for everyone to know how to bring it up. How do we address the issue?
Such a good point, Karen. I'm with you on that. Christine, to your question, can I just quickly say, for the benefit of the audience, there are a number of options. We have choices at the end of life, and like hospice and so on. But in terms of treatment, there's the first one is stopping. You can stop life-sustaining treatments. You can just you have, as a patient, you have that choice. And then of course there's VSED, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. If you are suffering unbearably, if you have the grit and fortitude, you can use VSED, best under hospice care, under a doctor like Karen. And then, of course, there's palliative sedation, which is not to end your life, but to ease your suffering, but usually does end up with the patient dying. So palliative sedation, we used to call that barbiturate sedation. And then, of course, there's FAN. Garen and I are both active in Final Exit Network, and they help support people who want to use inert gases to hasten their deaths, nitrogen hypoxia. And so that's another way. And then there's the Swiss option. And and foreigners can go to Switzerland, take advantage of their progressive made laws. They call it VAD, voluntary VAD. But Switzerland is, and then of course we've already mentioned MAID, MAID, medical aid in dying. As Karen said, is only available in 11 states. Soon Delaware looks like it's going to be added to that list in 10 states, including DC, and that's where you take a doctor prescribes a dose of lethal drugs, and it is legal for you to self-administer them, not intravenously, but through the gut, through the rectally, or through the peg feed, or through the mouth. And so these are so people do have options. The point I'm trying to make here is that it's not just a question of living haphazardly and then seeing what happens as you end of life. No, you can take some active role in shaping the end of your life. Back to you.
Well, let me just say that it may sound a bit scary, the notion of pulling your own plug, but a lot of the dying that happens in medical facilities are futile extensions of the dying process. There's no other end in sight. It just extends a suffering in the end in a way that we wouldn't even permit for our pets.
Yeah.
And if we love our pets, we should certainly love our loved ones.
When you said feudal, is that Feudal?
No,
Yeah, it sounds almost
Feutile.
futile, doesn't it? Futile in the sense of hopeless.
Oh, like futility.
Wasting money.
Futile. Yeah, as
Wasting
in
money
futility.
at the expense of additional suffering, no additional benefit.
My goodness, what little I know for the organ one, I learned on a podcast out of Portland, Oregon, and it was extensive. It was a big, thick, you have voiced your opinion. We're going to come and speak with you. We have a lot of protocols, procedures about how long it's been, how you are cognitively. If you're speaking out of, I'm going to say, a depression, and that's not me trying to be medical or psychologically any kind of a specialist, but there was quite a process to go through as opposed to someone going, well, I guess this is goodbye. It really was thoughtful, careful. It gave me information to have a conversation with a person who has lost a person, who has lost a loved one through years of dementia and came to an end. And they were speaking, I would say, bluntly and emotionally to me, a complete stranger who was wearing a badge having to do with aging. And very bluntly, they said, well, if I get dementia and I get that bad, that needs to be defined. What they mean, how they're feeling. Will they be at a point after all of these procedures of writing and documenting that they are still able to know who I am, where I am, what's going on, and what is my choice? It was helpful for me to say, as a caregiver, I was about comfort and extended life, and I'll see you next week on my next assigned shift. So I said it isn't something that I ever addressed personally, but I'm letting you know that if you got that bad, there is quite a procedure to go through so that you can think and think again and draw a breath and maybe talk with other people whose opinions do matter to you. And it was nice to have an intelligent, informed conversation with a person who was basically saying that was a terrible experience of having someone be not who they used to be and for such a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put someone else through that.
Right. So, Christine, let me interrupt you to say that medical aid in dying does not help people with dementia.
No. You would have to be in your last 6 months, and that is difficult to diagnose. Dementia doesn't play by any rules.
Right. So, if you have dementia, it's a real problem, as we all know, and medical aid in dying doesn't help because you have to be within 6 months of medical aid in dying, you have to be 6 months of dying, and you have to have the cognitively, you have to have capacity, and those two things just can't happen at the same time. So you have a small window when you have dementia where you can put in your you can ask for if you live in a medical if you live in a MAID state where MAID is legal, you can ask for it. But after it's only a small window, because if you do it too soon, then you lose life. If you lose good life, quality life. If you do it too late, then you've lost the opportunity because you're no longer cognitively able to do it. But Final Exit Network can help people with dementia. So if anybody's listening to this who has dementia or have a loved one who has dementia, please look into Final Exit Network. That website is finalexitnetwork.org. And also, of course, there's the Swiss option too. You can just Google Dignitas or the Swiss option for hastening death, and you'll quickly find the information. So Gary and Karen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, Karen, you live in California, right?
Now I do, yes.
And you have a maiden a dying law there. Do you personally deal with this issue of people wanting to access the law but having a dementia issue?
I'm retired from clinical practice now, but I know that it is an issue, and just one of the challenges of the law, that it doesn't meet the needs of such a large group of people who are the people most likely to want to utilize it. And so that is an issue for sure, but I also understand it's hard to get around that because they want to have some standards. And
yeah. Let me quickly add for the benefit of listeners to what Karen just said. There's an organization called A Better Exit. A Better Exit. You can Google it. In California, they are working to amend the law in two ways. First of all, we need to get rid of the sunset clause so it becomes a permanent law. But in addition to that, they would like to have people self-administer the lethal drugs, but do it intravenously. But that is not lawful anywhere in the country at the moment. And then there's some other changes too. But the law is not as progressive, I think, as some of us would like to see it.
There's one more resource. There are several organizations that produce supplements, little attachments you can put on your advance directive to define what you want while you're still have all your marbles, right? And when you're no longer capable of defending that choice, at least it's written down, and you have people who will support your choice. Final Exit Network has one. Compassion and Choices, another organization, has one. And if you ever have any concern that might be a situation facing you or a loved one, it would be very advisable to get that attachment, fill it out, and make sure it's part of your advance directive.
That is such an excellent point. And for viewers' benefit, you can go to the Compassion and Choices website and look for it's called Dementia Tools and Values, something very close to that. And you can quickly find it. And in 20 minutes, you can fill out that form and then add it, as Gary was just indicating, add it to your advance directive. It's a very wise thing to do.
You had mentioned earlier, sorry, I was trying to word it correctly to lead into this next question. Losing good life. If you make a decision too soon, you would be losing good life.
Yeah.
And most people agree that there is better ways to live life, and it's been talked about that the best way to die is to live well up to that point, using emotional intelligence, which means including and being valuing others' opinions, and like you said, having friends and being involved in life. So I don't think it helps very much, but I'm sure that you have an answer to what do you think are the issues and the challenges preventing a good death?
Karen, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I would have to say it. It's really our fear of death and our avoidance of wanting to think about and talk about death. And so, whenever we see someone who's in their last few days or weeks of life who has never once given thought to the fact that they're mortal and that they'll die one day, oftentimes they've just been blindsided and they're terrified. They're dealing with all of these emotions, and there's so much work that they need to do in order to just get comfortable with the fact that they're dying that could have been done earlier on if they had been able to talk about it. And so that I see that that's the biggest obstacle. It's within us throughout our society. It's kind of been artificially created because we humans are creatures who used to be aware of mortality, and we used to care for our own dead at home. And that was part of our makeup and who we are, but we have lost it. And we really need to get back to a place where we can have that awareness and just have these open discussions without fear.
Yeah.
I know it's possible. I lived and worked for years in Central America, Guatemala, and with today is Cinco de Mayo, and that brings to mind Mexico, right? And in Mexico and Guatemala and places that I've lived, around our Halloween, Day of the Dead, for them, people recognize the reality of mortality. No big deal. You go to the cemetery, you have some mariachis, you drink a little tequila, the kids are there. It's a flowers, festive occasion. You can, you make little ofrendas, they're called, little shrines to the loved departed one, who there's usually a photo and grandpa's favorite cigar or whatever it is, something to remember your ancestors. And the little kids running around. I've seen a little kid pick up a small candy in the shape of a skull, and it had his name on it. And he giggled and laughed and said, "I'm eating death." And so for that kid, there was, it's a whole different cultural way of viewing death. And I think, as Karen pointed out, when I was born in 1940, that's kind of how it was here, more or less. Death was a family, religious, community thing. It wasn't a modern medical, commercial, monetized thing. So we need to work to get back to that, I believe.
Those are very good answers by Karen and Gary. I think the only thing I can add is ways to start the conversations with people who are very afraid of them. And I think you can say things like, mom or dad or the children, you can say things like, look, I need your help. I need to, I know I'm going to die like everybody else. I need your advice and counsel on this. That's one way to do it. Another way is to say, do you remember how Auntie Susan died? What did you think of that? How did that, how was that for you? Is that the way you want to die? Is that the way you want to see me die? I mean, these are ways to sort of try to open up the conversation with people who don't want to talk about it. So asking for help, referencing points in the common experiences in the family. These are some ways to try and break through this taboo.
Oh, that just brought up another thought. Families can be separated by oceans, and to make a plan ahead of time to go, if I should not wake up, if I should experience a terrible traffic accident, if I go in for a simple surgery and I do not survive, whatever occurs, that within a very short amount of time, I'm gone. I would like for everyone to receive this email letter that I've written. It's like, I'm sorry you're going through this deep shock right now. If that was the way that person responded, they always sent out letters at holidays. They have always kept up with people. Just like I would like this sent out by email, by pigeon, whatever it takes, so that people know I care about, I care in the moment that I'm writing this. I care about how this tragic news is affecting you right now.
Yeah.
And if you don't think it's a tragedy and you thought she's lived good and long, that this is a good time. Well, you know what? That is exactly what happened. I lived good and long, or I lived long and I lived good.
Christine,
Christine,
I'm laughing because I have a pile of letters, maybe 15 or 20 letters my wife has written to all of her friends that my job, I think she said 10 days after she's gone, to put in the mail so that all of her friends will get these individualized letters from heaven.
That's wonderful. So Christine and Gary, the only thing I would add to your comments is that I recommend to people that they write those letters, but they share them before they die. I mean, why wait? The letters are expressions of love, of deep love, of what matters to you. They're letters describing why you cherish these friends, these family members, whoever, and so why not, as Martin Seligman, this positive psychologist, talks about, why not take these letters, call up the person, say, I want to talk to you. Can I come and see you over coffee? Read the letter out loud slowly. Everybody will be crying, and it's a lovely bonding thing to do. Why wait till after you die for people to get the pleasure of the letters expressing so much love and expressing what mattered to people and why their lives had meaning?
Well, I'm going to start off by answering in my own way the final question, which this is really good timing for this, because I was thinking, what resources do I have? And I have answers for that. Number one, I wrote an article. My husband read it and said that should become a book, said it's going to be a really short book. And he suggested how I could expand it a bit. And it's still a very tiny book. And it's the Care Griever Kit. And it is not, there's no legal, medical, what's the other one that you're not supposed to do when you're not the expert? Financial. There's no legal, medical, or financial suggestions. I suggest very practically that you select a container that just makes sense to you, that you wouldn't mind having around. Maybe it's waterproof and the basement floods, whatever. Maybe it's the old sewing kit of great-grandmothers, whatever it is. And then I go through suggestions of what to put in there, going through a grieving process, continuing to re-grieve. And near the end, I went, oh, I know the one subject that I am actually avoiding here. And it was like, if you know that your demise is impending, reverse the order. Rather than putting things into the kit that help you to grieve healthfully, to grieve as deeply as you need to grieve in a way that gets the flywheel turning again, to put you into the mainstream of life that you choose to be in. But, at this point, I'm low, I'm not functioning. It must have to do with someone that I'm missing. But this one, I said, reverse it. It is hard to talk to at least one other person somewhere who is caring that you're leaving forever. And it is hard to have that conversation. So put something into that kit when they come to visit, when they walk down the hall and they notice the closet door is a little bit open, they can see that you've put something in there. And it may be just, I wanted to tell you that I did lie to you about what happened to your kitten, and I hope you can forgive me. They didn't go to be a star on a TV show. They actually met with a tragic thing, and I just could not deal with it. Whatever it is, you put a couple of tickets in there for an upcoming play, and that gives them a chance to go, so do you want to go see that stage production? No, actually, I was thinking I want you and so to go, because I would love to know that you are enjoying it. I don't have the energy now to enjoy it or stay through the whole thing, but I want you to, whatever it is, just a chance to talk back and forth. That's not so, well, should we sit here and talk about things we don't want to talk about right now? Because that was hard for people that I served and their loved ones who are hovering around. But when that person would say, I know I'm getting closer to the end, I'm even having dreams about my end, and I want to talk about that. And here is a person who is absolutely loving them, dealing with the reality of what's going on, but they're just like, let's not talk about that. You're having a good day today. You've got energy, and we were going to do something pleasant. Let's not talk about that, right? And they're like, that's why I want to talk about it, because my mind is clear. I'm not on as much pain medication. I just want to tell you about this song that keeps going through my mind as I'm going to sleep, etc. The other thing is, watch my show. Scroll back through, pop something in, have it going in the background, because you're getting stuff done. And all of a sudden someone says, and I created this app, and I put together a device, and we have a resource that you can go to once a week, etc., where you put in your legacy decisions. There's actually one like this. You put in your legacy decisions going, I want the people in my future to receive this, whether I'm unconscious, deeper into dementia, dead, distant from them, just not paying attention to the calendar. I want them to receive this on this date, and bing, it'll come to them. And I want them to hear this, know this, see this picture, look at me being silly, look at me being serious, whatever it is. So those things do exist. Okay. That was do you have any resources to recommend? My book, which is on my website, agingbeternetwork.com. That everything's there. These replays, that book, etc. Who wants to go?
I can't help but repeat the Good Death Society blog. We've had, I think, 339,000 views. It has dozens and dozens of short reader-friendly articles on any aspect of all we've discussed about and more. So it's very easy to access, very easy to download, and you can use it as a tool for discussion with your loved ones, or, say, hey, take a look at this. Let's talk about this. Both Chris and Karen have written for it, but many other experts have. And so that's a resource that has many, many dimensions to it.
Let's see what they said. Do you agree? Do I agree? We're not really talking about it. We're talking about them. We're talking about what they wrote. So it's a degree of separation, maybe a little more comfortable.
So I want to. So Gary, also another resource I was expecting you to mention was Final Exit Network, finalexitnetwork.org.
Yeah, it's a website that also has many resources that can be clicked on and checked out. The Advanced Directive for Dementia, for example, is there. There's a speakers bureau. If any of your listeners have an organization, a church or a community group or whatever would like to have a talk on, the challenges and options at end of life, free speakers bureau service there, a number of other things, how to pick and what type of surrogate you need to have to be there for you when you need it. So there's quite a few resources also there.
Wow, you mean a death doula?
Oh, a death doula is also important. It's not a surrogate necessarily. Sometimes it can be the same person. But let's talk about death doulas. My daughter is one of them.
Wow. And we did last week talk with Barbara Carnes and her daughter and daughter-in-law.
Oh,
and death
she's
doula
great.
came up because it goes with birth doula,
Right.
another natural part of life.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, she's great.
That involves one person and other people, and then that individual, maybe the medical doctor, maybe the family, and the individual who's being birthed or is transitioning into their final moments, their final act of living, as Barbara puts it. Okay, we've got
Karen
4 minutes. Go for it.
Yeah, Karen is going to go next, but it's easier for me to boast about her book than for her because she's modest. But Karen's book, I want to tell everybody, is called 7 Lessons. Your husband is going to put this up, I'm sure. 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying. Karen, please go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for shouting that out. I wanted to call attention to a couple of other resources. theconversationproject.org, which is a great place to go if you want to have conversations and you don't know where to start. They have tons of resources and it's really helpful for having these end-of-life conversations. I also love deathcafe.com, where you can find out if there are death cafes in your area where you can go and sit with people. You don't even have to say a word. You can sit with other people who are talking about death and listen. Sometimes that's a good entry point for people who are trying to deal with their fear. And then I have a podcast called End of Life University. And I'm just up to my 500th episode on the podcast. And so you can listen to all these conversations similar to what you're doing, Christine, with people who talk about everything around death and dying. And Gary's been on the podcast and Chris will be as well in the future.
Oh,
that's wonderful. And so I will end by simply saying, so this is one resource of my book, Achieving a Good Death, A Practical Guide to the End of Life. And then my website is chrispalmeronline.com. There are lots of free handouts there on all kinds of subjects. So those are 2 recommendations. But the recommendations made by Gary and Karen for resources were wonderful. I support them. I support everything they said as well.
And I want to point out that we're volunteers. We're not making money off of this. And all of the resources that we have suggested are free and available.
that is good to know. This isn't an industry thing with you. This is a work of the heart.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I am very grateful that we went live with death, because somebody is going, I did not know that. And that is important to me. And I guess I do want a good death. So thank you. And EOL, that's end of life. I'm really accustomed to that now. I know exactly what it is. I don't even say the words in my mind. I see EOL, but that is end of life. And it has happened to everyone. So you may as well take the helm with both hands and steer it in the direction that best fits you, because it is your final act of living. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Gary, for going live with death on Aspects of Aging. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.